Yeah. All right, everybody. Time is 2:30. If you would silence your phones, turn off your GPS. So I will call the May 21st, 2025 STRGBA GSA meeting to order. Here in the room, we have a quorum. So starting at the far end, we got Mike Pitcock from the city of Waterford. We got Jeff Roberts from city of Oakdale. We got Paul Pichelle from Modesto Irrigation District. Right to my left is Christy McKinnon with Stanislaus County. And to my right is Timothy Barahona with the city of Modesto. I am Eric Thorburn with the Oakdale Irrigation District. Jennifer, you can hear us on the phone okay?
Yes, I can.
All right, thank you. Okay. Everybody up here, make sure your mic's on too, so the button should be popped up now. Everybody can hear you on the phone. Thank you. So we're gonna start with business from the public. So at this time, interested persons are welcome to introduce any topic within the GSA's jurisdiction. Matters presented under this heading may be discussed, but no action will be taken by the GSA at this meeting. It is not required, but the speakers may provide their name and address. Public comments will be limited to 5 minutes per speaker. So we will open it up to the public.
Will we comment on the issues on the agenda?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, seeing no hands raised on the phone. Nobody in the room. We will move right along. Michael. Thanks, Tom. Okay, item number 3. This is the March 26th, 2025 meeting minutes. I think everybody's had a chance to review those minutes. I'll entertain a motion. Paul. Thank you, Mike. Before proceeding to a vote, I will open it up to public for public comment on the minutes, March 26th minutes. You know, hands raised on the phone, nobody in the room. Proceed to a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Item number 4, this is the Modesto Subbasin Fall 2024 water level analysis. This is going to be a presentation by Todd Groundwater. And Liz has her hand up for some reason. Hopefully she's able to get on. Jennifer, I think Liz, yeah, she needs to be promoted to a panelist.
She's rejoining. It's just taking a second.
Yes. Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Hi, sorry, I just was changed to a panelist, so it's going to take me a second.
Okay.
Let me share my screen and we can get started.
I'll just note that the presentation, the slides for the presentation are available online. STRGBA GSA, STRGBA.org. Go to meetings and then today's date. If you want to pull that up and have the slides in front of
you. Okay, can you hear me clearly and see the presentation?
Yes.
Great. Okay. Thanks. Sorry for the delay there. So hi, my name is Liz Elliott, Todd Groundwater, and we recently analyzed the groundwater levels that were measured during the fall 2024 monitoring event. So I wanted to take you through those results. So the agenda here is to discuss the fall 2024 GSP monitoring event. and then provide you with some draft results. Now, these draft results are going to be part of the next annual report. So the fall 2024 event, as well as the spring event, spring 2025 event, are part of water year 2025 and will be reported to DWR and the annual report due to DWR in April 2026. So the next annual report. So the draft results include an analysis of the groundwater elevations in comparison with the sustainable management criteria. Also show you some hydrographs to give you a sense of what's happening in the subbasin. And then I'll end with kind of a summary of the results and a perspective. And this picture that you see on the right-hand side of the slide is of monitoring well MW8. This is one of the monitoring wells that was constructed in 2021 with Prop 68 funding from DWR. And here we are measuring water levels in that well. This picture is several years old. So to begin with, I just wanted to remind you of the definition of undesirable results as defined in the GSP, both the original GSP as well as the revised GSP that was submitted to DWR last summer, July 2024. So there are two different monitoring networks for where we evaluate groundwater elevations. One is the chronic lowering of groundwater levels, and the other is interconnected surface water. For chronic lowering of groundwater levels, an undesirable result will occur when at least 33% of the representative monitoring wells exceed the minimum threshold, MT, for a principal aquifer and 3 consecutive fall monitoring events. For interconnected surface water, an undesirable result will occur on one of the rivers when between 33% to 50% of the representative monitoring wells for that river exceed the MT in 3 consecutive fall events. And the percentages differ by river based on the number of wells that we have in the networks along those rivers. It's 33% on the Stanislaus and Tuolumne rivers and 50% on the San Joaquin River. So the fall 2024 GSP monitoring event was the 6th GSP monitoring event since the GSP was submitted in January 2022. During this fall event, groundwater elevations were measured in early November in 59 representative monitoring wells. There were 2 representative monitoring wells where water levels could not be measured because of casing obstructions, and those were wells Wood and Quisenberry. And here is a summary of the minimum threshold exceedances. There are 2 different tables here. On the left-hand side, it's for chronic lowering of water levels. On the right is interconnected surface water. So we'll start on the left-hand side. Again, this is just fall 2024 results. This table on the left is divided into each of the principal aquifers: Western Upper, above Corcoran Clay; Western Lower, below Corcoran Clay; and Eastern Principal Aquifer to the east of the Corcoran Clay. So in the Western Upper Principal Aquifer, there are 17 wells, and there were no MT exceedances, so it's 0% exceeded the MT. Western Lower Principal Aquifer, there are 5 wells. They were water levels in all 5 wells were above the minimum threshold. So again, 0% exceeded the MT. And in the Eastern Principal Aquifer, there were 37 wells measured. There were 10 wells with water levels below the minimum threshold, which is 27% below. And each of these percentages is highlighted green, as you can see. And the reason for that is that we are below the 33% threshold. Again, the definition of undesirable results is based on fall monitoring events. So this was an important event, but we were below the 33% threshold in each of the principal aquifers. Now moving to the right for interconnected surface water, for the 3 rivers. Along the San Joaquin River, there are 2 wells. Water levels in both of those wells were above the minimum threshold, so 0% exceeded the MT. Along the Stanislaus River, there are 8 wells, 2 of which had water levels that were below the MT for 25%. And along the Tuolumne River, there are 9 wells that were measured. 1 had water levels below the MT. or 11%. So again, these are highlighted green because they are below the either 33% or 50% for the San Joaquin River. So we're below those thresholds that would start to count towards undesirable results, which is good news. Now, here's a summary of all of the GSP monitoring events that have been conducted so far. Again, there have been, this is the sixth event since January 2022. And this table summarizes the percentage of MT exceedances. And for the fall events, I've highlighted them either green or pink to indicate whether or not it's above or below the threshold for undesirable results. The green highlight means it's below the 33% threshold for chronic lowering of groundwater levels, and for interconnected surface water, it's either the 33% or 50%, and the pink is above. So you can see in fall 2022, which was a pretty dry year, we had 57% of wells in the eastern principal aquifer that had water levels that were below the minimum threshold. So that is above that 33% and why it's colored pink. Similarly, in fall 2022, along each river, we exceeded that threshold of percentages that count towards undesirable results. But the good news is that since then, the next two fall events, fall 2023 and fall 2024, we are below those thresholds in all principal aquifers and along each of the rivers. But I will note that if you look at the percentages, particularly in the eastern principal aquifer, the last, the three fall events, it's 57% in 2022, fall 2022, 30% in fall 2023, and 27% in fall 2024. Now, the fall 2023 and fall 2024, those were relatively wet years, and we are just a hair below that 33% threshold. So it's just something to keep our eye on. Even during wet years, we were pretty close to that threshold. So it's something to keep our eyes on in the future, and it's not surprising because we do know that groundwater levels continue to decline in the eastern part of the subbasin. Interim milestones. So the GSP and the revised GSP defined interim milestones that are below the minimum threshold in 2027 for wells that are in the non-district east and the OID management areas. And this hydrograph on the right-hand side just illustrates what that looks like. This is for one of the wells within the OID management area. So in this case, the minimum threshold is set at 71 feet, and the interim milestone is at 56 feet, about 15 feet below that. And the fall 2024 level, I know this is pretty small, but it's right at the minimum threshold. So we're not near the interim milestone in this example. But this is just one example of a hydrograph showing where the interim milestone is in relation to the minimum threshold for wells where the IM, the 2027 IM, is below the MT. So for the chronic lowering of water levels, there are 14 wells with interim milestones. In fall 2024, no wells had groundwater elevations that exceeded the IM. There was one well with an IM, Quisenberry well, which had no measurement. Like I mentioned before, there is a casing obstruction, so measurement was not taken. For the interconnected surface water monitoring network, there are 5 wells with IMs. And again, water levels were above the IM, I'm sorry, were above the IM in each of these wells in fall 2024. So we did not have any IM exceedances during this fall 2024 monitoring event. So moving on, I'm going to show you and march through each principal aquifer, starting with the western upper principal aquifer, which again is the aquifer, shallow aquifer above the Corcoran clay. And I'm going to show you a map of where the MT, where the representative monitoring wells are for each aquifer, and then show you some hydrographs. And on this map, and all 3 of the maps I'm going to show you, or actually one for the rivers, But each well is highlighted either green or pink or red. And the green, all the green dots you see here mean that water levels at all of these wells in the Western Upper Principal Aquifer were above the minimum threshold. There were no MT exceedances. In fact, many of these wells actually had groundwater elevations that were above the measurable objectives, which was nice to see. And to compare to the previous fall event, fall 2023, it was similar. Fall 2023, there were no representative monitoring wells with water levels below the MT in the Western Upper Principal Aquifer. So now I'll show you a couple of hydrographs from the Western Upper Principal Aquifer. This is the Caton well. This is located, you can see in the inset map on the lower right, this is located in the very western part of the Western Upper Principal Aquifer. And this last dot that you're seeing on the hydrograph is the fall 2024 event. So I don't know if you can see my cursor, but the fall 2022 water level was well below the minimum threshold. Since then, water levels have recovered, and the last couple of years they've been pretty stable, and we are right about at the measurable objective. This next hydrograph is for a well called Curtis, number 2100. It's a little bit further east in the Western Upper Principal Aquifer, a little bit closer to the edge of the Corcoran Clay. And hello? Someone have a question?
Are you interruptible or is that?
Oh yeah, go ahead.
We'll take, Liz, we'll take questions at the end.
Okay.
Questions at the end? Okay. Okay, so Curtis, similar. We're seeing a water level recovery since the spring of 2023 and relatively stable the last year and a half. And in fall 2024 as well as spring 2024, we're above the measurable objective. Moving on to the Western Lower Principal Aquifer, there are 5 wells in this monitoring network. And in fall 2024, groundwater elevations at all 5 of these wells were above the minimum threshold. And compared to the previous fall event, fall 2023, there was 1 well that had elevations below the minimum threshold, and that was at 2D, the one right next to the Tuolumne River down here. So a couple of make sure I'm the right one. Yep, a couple of hydrographs for the Western Lower Principal Aquifer. This is Modesto MWB2. This is one of the monitoring wells that was constructed by the city of Modesto several years ago, right on the edge of the Corcoran, near the edge of the Corcoran Clay in the Western Lower Principal Aquifer, below the Corcoran. Water levels in fall 2024 are above the measurable objective, as you can see. And you can see sort of, if you start looking in 2020 through about 2022, the seasonal fluctuations are pretty pronounced. But then if you look at the last 2 years, 2023 and 2024, they're less pronounced. And this is most likely due to wetter years and less pumping. So we're seeing less of a seasonal fluctuation. This is another monitoring well in the Western Lower Principal Aquifer, MW2D. This is pretty close to the Tuolumne River, as you can see on the inset map. The fall 2024 water level is above the minimum threshold. And this is actually the first time a fall of measurement is above the minimum threshold since the well was constructed. Now, it was only a few years old. I mean, the first measurement was in January, or I should say, spring of 2021. But still, since then, this was the first fall event where we're above the minimum threshold. And similar to the previous hydrograph, the seasonal fluctuations over the last 2 years are a little bit less pronounced than before then. Again, most likely due to less pumping because of a wetter years. Now moving to the Eastern Principal Aquifer. So this, as you can see, has a mix of red dots and green dots. Again, the green dots are wells whose water levels were above the minimum threshold. The red dots are wells whose water levels are below the minimum threshold. So there are 27 wells on this map that are green, that are above the minimum threshold, 10 that are below the red dots, and 2 wells that were not measured. So again, 27% were below the minimum threshold. There were 14 wells with interim milestones. They were all water levels at all of them were above the IMs. One was not measured, that's Quisenberry. And to compare to the previous fall event, fall 2023, where we had 11 wells, or 30% below the MT. So it's pretty similar. But you can sort of just see kind of just, if you just focus on where the red dots are located, most of the MT exceedances are in the eastern part of the subbasin, which is something that we have been seeing consistently over the last few years. So now I'm going to show you a series of 3 hydrographs in the eastern principal aquifer, and we're going to sort of march, as you can see on the inset map. This is sort of on the western part of the eastern principal aquifer, and each hydrograph I'm going to show you is going to march to the east. This is the Clarabelle well. In fall 2024, we're above the minimum threshold here. We see seasonal fluctuations throughout, but you see sort of an inflection here, or in 2014, water levels sort of shifted lower during the severe drought that we had in the mid 2014, 2015, 2016, and have sort of stayed at this kind of lower level since then. But we see seasonal fluctuations, relatively stable water levels since that kind of shift in 2014. But we are and have been pretty consistently above the minimum threshold, even with that shift and with the seasonal fluctuations. And then this is moving slightly east. This is Bentley OID 2. The water level in fall 2024 is very slightly below the minimum threshold. So this does count as an MT exceedance, even though it is really, really close to the MT. And you can see, the first measurements were made in 2005. And since that time, there's an overall declining trend. But over the last couple of years, water levels in this well have been relatively stable. But since early 2005, the first measurement, groundwater elevation was about 100, and we're at about 70 now. So that's a decline of about 30 feet over the last approximately 20 years. East, this is the Paulsell 1 OID 11 well. The water level is below the MT, as you can see, in fall 2024. It's been below the minimum threshold since 2021, early 2021. It was first measured in 2005, and the elevation was approximately 145. And the latest elevation in fall 2024 is in approximately 73. So it's a pretty significant decline over that 20-year period. We see that the easternmost wells in the subbasin do have the highest rates of decline. So this is a map showing you the monitoring network for interconnected surface water along each of the 3 rivers. So along the San Joaquin River, there are 2 wells, these 2 green dots here, and we're above the MT in both. Along the Stanislaus River, there are 2 wells that with water levels that exceeded the minimum threshold. The rest were above. And along the Tuolumne River, 1 well, MW6S, near Waterford, was below the MT, and all the rest were above. And this, compared to the previous fall event, fall 2023, was the same. So I'm going to show you one hydrograph from each of the rivers, from each of the networks along the rivers. This is Canfield 90 along the San Joaquin River. The water level in fall 2024 was pretty similar, increased slightly from the spring event, pretty similar, and we're above the measurable objective here. So pretty stable over the last couple of years. And then moving to the Stanislaus River, this is Birnbaum. In fall 2024, the water level is below the minimum threshold. Just a few feet, maybe 3-4 feet. When this well was first measured, it was elevation of about 100, and now we're down to about 70. And we're seeing seasonal fluctuations over the last 2 years have been pretty similar. 2023 and 2024 levels, the spring levels are similar and the fall levels are similar to one another after kind of recovering a bit from fall 2022. Again, likely from wetter years. And this is a hydrograph for lateral 195 along the Tuolumne River. And fall 2024, the water level is above the MT. Pretty stable water level during calendar year 2024. And we have seen increasing trends since fall 2022. So we are well above the MT here. So just wanted to sort of summarize what these results mean, and then kind of give you a perspective of on where we're at. So the fall 2024 monitoring event showed relatively stable groundwater levels throughout most of the subbasin after 2 consecutive wet years. According to the San Joaquin Valley Water Index, water year 2023 was wet and water year 2024 was above normal. Groundwater levels in the easternmost subbasin continued to decline. MT exceedances were below the threshold for undesirable results, below that 33% throughout most of the subbasin, or 50% along the Stanislaus and Tuolumne rivers. I'm sorry, the 50% is just the San Joaquin River. Everything else is 33%. But we're below that threshold for undesirable results, so that's good. And we don't have any wells with groundwater elevations below the interim milestones. So here's a broader perspective. You know, long-term groundwater level declines have occurred in the non-district east and have propagated into both OID and MID's management areas, parts of MID's management areas. And so the 2027 interim milestones below the minimum threshold were developed for the wells within these 2 management areas. And this was in recognition that these water levels in these areas were declining historically, and it would take some time for projects and management actions to be developed and implemented and to have an effect on the water levels to turn the trends around. To date, the groundwater levels in the eastern subbasin, particularly in the non-district east management area, continue to decline. The STRGBA GSA is committed to developing management actions by January 31st, 2026, and implementing these management actions a year later by January 31st, 2027, in order to arrest these groundwater level declines. So we have told DWR in the GSP and the revised GSP that by 2027, we'll hit that inflection point in these areas with declining water levels. And DWR wants to see that we have the tools in the toolbox to do that. And developing management actions and implementing them is a huge part of this toolbox. So that's all I have. Are there any questions?
Liz, we'll open it up to the member agencies first for any questions or comments on the presentation.
I have no question, Liz, but can you send me some data, like the hydrograph for monitoring well 6S? Send it to me by email. I'm interested in what's going on in Waterford.
Sure.
Thank you.
No problem. I'll jot that down.
So that data should be available in the annual report too, right, Liz? So if you just go back to the annual report, the very back, all of the hydrographs are almost there. The only thing you won't have is some data that was done since that year.
I'd like to see the updated one.
Yeah. Just for the public too. So.
Kind of what years I like to kind of see what it's
Trending. Yep.
Yep.
Anyone else? Paul? No?
Just maybe a point of minor clarification on the slide where it shows the fall 2024 minimum thresholds. When you're calculating those percentages, it's based on active wells and it doesn't consider at all the wells you weren't able to measure. So we're not penalized or benefited by that in any way. When they came back on board, it would affect the data. I do have a general question with regard to those that weren't measured. If you have a general indication by nearby wells, whether or not they would add to or take away from the percent below. And that may be a question you can't answer.
Yeah, so to answer your first question, the wells that are not measured, so Quisenberry and Wood, are not counted towards the percentage. So the percentage is only based on the measured wells. The answer to your second question is I don't know. I haven't seen data from wells that are close to Quisenberry. That is an area of the subbasin where we don't have a lot of information. But I think when we work on the 5-year evaluation, which we're going to be getting started on soon, I think that's something that we're certainly going to be interested in doing, because I think that not having data in that area of the subbasin, it would be helpful to have some more data, and so replacing Quisenberry with another well nearby would be really helpful, I think. But I don't know what water levels are doing in that area and other wells, because I haven't seen the data, but I'd love to.
Liz, can you pull up slide 18 with the map?
Okay, I don't know the numbers. Hold on.
Farther. It's the Eastern Principal Aquifer map.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Oops. Yes. Hold on.
Yeah, I think that's it. No, a couple before that,
No.
I believe.
Okay, this one
There we
here.
go.
Yes.
Yeah, so on that map, you can see where Wood is and where Quisenberry is, and you can see some
Yes.
the wells around it. So Wood, yeah, right there where your mouse is. So
Yeah.
it's kind of in the center. It's east of the Corcoran, in the middle of that eastern portion of Modesto management area. And so it looks like the wells around it are generally above the MTs because it's not in red. Those aren't
That's
in
right.
red around it, right? So it'd be a fairly good assumption to think that it's probably in the same condition there, I would say. Whereas the Quisenberry, that's all the way to the east, or it's pretty far to the east, and it's in that non-district east kind of Swiss cheese area of the Modesto area, right? So it's down there, yep, in the south. Everything around that from the east to the west is kind of trending toward being below the minimum threshold. And so my thought on this, and you can't be certain because we don't have the water levels, but if it was doing the same trending the same way, you'd have one that was above and one that was below. And by looking at the percentages, that put us about 28% instead of 27%. So it actually hurt us, but it would help us in collecting data. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I think that's right.
Okay. Anything else?
No, that's all I have.
Christy?
So Liz, we don't get any leeway because we have these interim milestones, and then we committed to make the management actions as part of our GSP revision to reverse the declining water levels by 2027. Those are two separate issues, right?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Can you repeat the question? You cut out for a second. It's a little bit choppy.
We revised our GSP with the commitment that we're going to develop and implement management actions to arrest the groundwater level declines before they go lower than the interim milestones. That doesn't give us any leeway, does it? In the meantime, with respect to maintaining our sustainable management criteria and keeping those groundwater levels above the minimum thresholds in 33% of our monitoring well network.
No, it doesn't. It does not give us a free pass. It's just a way to point out to DWR, hey, we expect continuous MT exceedances in these areas. It's sort of recognition, in January 2022 when the GSP was submitted, it was like saying, hey, look, the historical data is showing that the trends are show that the water levels are declining. It's just going to take we're saying 5 years for projects and management actions to be implemented and have an effect, right? So it's not giving us a free pass. It's just sort of a way to show DWR and to manage the expectations a little bit. Like, this is what we expect. And that's what when DWR read the original GSP, they said, okay, that's okay. We don't mind IMs below MTs. But please, like, what effect will going below MTs to the IMs have on the beneficial uses and users of groundwater? And so they asked for an analysis of the impacts, and primarily the impacts to wells. And so that was a big part of the revised GSP. But no, it's not. It doesn't give us a free pass in terms of the 33% threshold for sustainable management criteria. But it is something that we have to continue to keep our eye on, because 2027 is obviously only a couple years away. So we need to make sure that DWR is going to be watching. They want to see that inflection point in 2027, and projects and management actions are the tools that we have to affect that.
Thanks, Liz.
Sure, thank you.
Liz, just one point of clarification with regard to it. You just said, you mentioned 2027. So correct me if I'm wrong here. So in the fall of 2027, that's going to be a key point in time where, in looking, I'm assuming, at both the interim thresholds,
Interim milestones.
interim milestones, excuse me, and the what's the other one called?
Minimum thresholds.
Minimum thresholds. That's where basically we'll be able to show the state that we are not, that we're reaching an inflection point for both of those, if both of those are an issue. In particular, with the interim milestones, correct?
Particularly with the IMs that are below the MTs, yes, yes. And so far, again, we do not have, there are no water levels that are below the IMs. And so we are not, seeing in fall 2024 that we are below the IMs, because that would be even more concerning, but we are below the minimum thresholds in a lot of those wells. And yes, you're right. We need to show DWR that this is we're gonna hit this inflection in 2027.
Yeah. I got one thing, Liz. So let's see, what slide is this? I'm looking at the western lower principal aquifer.
Yep.
And so I've got it as feet 16 and 17. So MOD-MWD-2. There you go.
Yep.
That one. And then the next page too, the next hydrograph. So both of those wells, we started collecting data in 2020. Well, I guess the fall of 2020, it looks like.
It's actually, it looks like spring of 2021.
Okay. I'm looking at the page before, I guess. Yeah, I'm looking at the one before.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
For MW2D, either one. Yeah, they're both.
Yeah.
Both of them, I
Mid-year
guess my point
2020.
is, yeah, we didn't have much information to work off of when we did the GSP.
Right.
When we established those minimum thresholds, and the measurable objectives, the minimum threshold was established based on the lowest point that we had, which was typically, I guess, from what was it, 91 to now? It was the lowest point, right, during that period of time?
Yeah.
Which is
Yes.
typically around 2015 in most wells. Was that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And yeah. Go ahead.
So we didn't have that data during that time. So we took an educated guess with wells in this vicinity and established this minimum threshold for this well. Is that correct?
Well, actually, I think in these cases, it was from 1991 through, I think, 2021. And if you look at this well, mod MWB2, these names are a tongue twister. The fall 2021 measurement, or I'm assuming that's fall or summer, is the minimum threshold. So I think at the time the GSP was being developed, that was the historical low. And so that's why the minimum threshold, that dot is right on the minimum threshold, because the minimum threshold is based on that.
Right.
And looking at this next one, this looks relatively similar. It's a little bit difficult to see because there's a cluster of dots here, but it looks like late 2021 value is right at the minimum threshold. So I think that's how these minimum thresholds were developed, based on the measured data that we had at the time when we were developing the GSP.
Yeah, so with limited data, we might want to think about in the 2027 update, maybe changing those minimum thresholds. I know in the Eastern San Joaquin, we did that same thing because we had some new wells that we didn't have historical data on. And that's not unreasonable, right?
Right. Nope. I think this is our chance to do that, the 5-year evaluation. And that's something we anticipated needing to do, because obviously we
Right.
knew that we didn't have a lot of data for these wells. These were brand new wells. But
Right.
yeah, that's something that we should be looking at, as.
And there's
part of
less
the-
fluctuation in the West. And so it seems like the minimum thresholds and the measurable objective, they're a lot closer than they are in the East, for example.
That is definitely true, because the measurable objective, so the minimum threshold was defined as the historical minimum. The measurable objective was the I think halfway between the MT and the historical max, if I'm not mistaken. So where we have more fluctuation, which is in the east, that there's more spacing between the MO and the MT. But yes, we're gonna need to revisit, sustainable management criteria as part of the 5-year evaluation. And it's something that we have been anticipating needing to do for this exact reason, for these new wells that didn't have a lot of data.
Right. Yeah, and I guess going back, the key point here in this presentation really is that, the 10th slide, I guess, with the table that shows the percentage of measured wells below the MT, representative monitoring wells, are RMWs. And really go back to 2023, you got that table? And I think,
This
man,
is-
we are right on the cusp
Yeah,
of exceeding that 33%.
yeah.
Or the 50%. I mean, any of the percentages for the river, 33% for Stanislaus, Tuolumne, San Joaquin, Eastern, Principal Aquifer. The West looks good, both in the upper and lower for several years. But I mean, we're talking this year, if we had, I think I looked at it, it's about, so if we had 3 more wells for the San Joaquin, or the Stanislaus rather, sorry, then we'd be at 37%. So we'd be exceeding that. It would only take us 3 more wells in the Eastern Principal Aquifer to get above that 33% as well. And there's some that are just right there. So
Yep.
That's a little concerning. And that's why DWR wants us to do what we're doing in looking at management actions and be able to turn that around that fall. So, okay.
Yes,
Any
I
other?
totally.
Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, I totally agree with what you just said.
All right. Any other member agency comments, questions? No? Okay. We'll open it up to the public.
All right, Mike Day, Provo Pritchard, I do work for some SOID growers and non-district west, so keep that in mind. I am an engineer, 43 years of experience doing this stuff. I know a little bit, but my career was south of here, where groundwater overdraft is much worse. Got a great situation up here. We can't do this. We can't be sustainable and shame on us, right? So we've got wonderful resources. I see a lot of cooperation. Thankful our GSP has been approved. And a lot of working together. I do see a wake-up call in the data. That's very strong. We've been blessed by you from us of hitting these thresholds. We kind of knew that the non-district east was a problem from the beginning as far as the water balance goes. To point to that big problem, and we got to do whatever we can to help them to get over that and work together. Can't afford state intervention, obviously. I think everybody knows that. But it's a call to action. Ask, how we doing? Let's not wait for a 5-year evaluation. Look deep and say, what could we do better? Just try to get there. I also just wanted to point out in the West, because it's been a good series of years, we've got about 12 feet to the groundwater. 12 feet. That's not much. So there isn't much margin. Now that on the east side and the west side, we've got this tilting thing. We know we're going to get some multi-year drought. It just come. We're going to get them. Be prepared for that. We know that's going to make things everywhere a problem. Can't remember that lesson. We keep learning it over and over again. But listen, remember those. We know we get multi-year floods. We don't have the margin on the west right now for that. We're just right below where it starts becoming a problem to the trees. And so anyway, it's a wake-up call, and I think there's more we can do together, but we definitely need to keep the focus where it needs to be, and areas that are out of balance, we've got to work together to get there.
I have a question about presentation. Anthony Ratto, Liz, I noticed, and maybe you guys have rehashed this, I apologize, but the bird bomb is both on the interconnected surface and listed on the eastern aquifer. Same with Allen. On one side it's green, the other side it's red, except for the bird bomb, which is red at both. Within the minimum threshold and and the MT and the MO are different between the two. But my real question is, why would the bird bomb be on the interconnected surface water? Well, does it have to do with the geology of that location or the distance to the river? Or how did you guys come up with that?
Yeah, good question. I will switch over to this slide. Can you see this slide? Yeah. So you nailed it. It's the distance to the river. We don't have a lot of wells that are relatively close to the rivers. Birnbaum is not exactly next to the river, but it's relatively close, and so we incorporate it into the network. And so that's why it's in both chronic lowering of water levels as well as the interconnected surface water. And the reason why it exceeds the MT in one and not in the other is because the definition of the minimum threshold is slightly different for chronic lowering of water levels and interconnected surface water. I believe interconnected surface water is based on 2015 levels, and the chronic lowering of water levels is based on the minimum threshold is the historical low. And so that's the difference and why the MTs are different in those two networks. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Can changes be made to which wells you're using for the interconnected surface? For example, I mean, if you switch to the Marquee, for example, which is green in both the eastern and the interconnected surface, why would we not want to use that if it looks good for both of them?
I think we do use Marquee for both, right? Are you suggesting just eliminating Birnbaum?
I guess no. I guess that you just highlighted Birnbaum here as opposed to presenting the hydrology for the Marquee.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I'm just showing you one hydrograph per river. So yeah, that's why.
Yes, thank you. John Duarte, 6706 Dusty Lane, Modesto, California. Both a in-district Modesto grower as well as a non-district East grower. So thank you for this today. Questions on wells in this report that are being attributed towards non-district east. We're talking about, really what we're saying here today is non-district east is about one drought away from draconian curtailment of its pumping. That's what I'm hearing. If I was a bank, that's certainly what I was hearing. But we're using the Bentley OID pump, which is actually in the middle of the Oakdale Irrigation District service area, and is an Oakdale Irrigation District service pump. It's probably, I mean, our wells on our little 240 acres out non-district east, we're pulling up 350, 400 acre feet a year out of each well. I'd really like to know what these wells that are being looked at here are pulling each year, and why they're representative of what we see on the non-district east. Much different and worse than the Bentley well is the Paul Cell well. This is Paul Cell 1. Now, if you look at Paul Cell 1 and Paul Cell 2, they're standing above ground. We call them the Twin Towers. They are probably the biggest wells. In fact, there's a table of wells that are listed in one of the previous reports. These are 815-foot deep wells. They're used by the Oakdale Irrigation District to serve in-district water needs, right? Instead of using surface water, we're pumping out of these two Paul Cell wells to serve in-district needs. In a previous district eastern aquifer map with the actual contour lines of the water table present, one of the Paul Cell wells literally had its own water contour ring around it because the cone of depression around that well was distinct. It was pumping so much. So I'd ask the OID water manager here, how many acre feet a year are Paul Cell 1 and Paul Cell 2 pulling, and how many aggregate acre feet of water are the OID wells pulling? And do we expect this to stop? Because I do respect that there is a Paul Cell canal siphon pipeline project underway. So if there's information on that, I guess I'm questioning the use of large district wells that have a lot of pull on them as representative.
Here are all of OID's wells. We've got 25 wells. Our total pumping last year was 1,300 acre feet. If that number were 2,500 acre feet, it would be 100 acre feet per well in OID. The Paul Cell well, so here's Paul Cell 1, here's Paul Cell 2. Combined is less than 200 acre feet for the entire year.
Is that representative of the previous 10 years?
This is the last year.
Yeah, but is that representative
show
of the
you.
Paul Cell wells previous 10 years?
Yep. Last 10 years, our average pumping is around 2,500 acre feet a year.
And what is the aggregate water, groundwater pumping in OID? And the district, not as used.
Yeah, with private, yeah, that's in the annual report. Off the top of my head, we looked at it. I think it's about 38,000 acre feet total.
So inside of OID, there's 38,000 acre feet of groundwater.
That's both north and south. So about half of that, north of the river and south of the river. So in this basin,
irrigation district is north of the river. Or is that not?
Yeah, we are too. So that map right there, you can see the Stanislaus River runs right through the middle of this. So in the Modesto Basin, roughly half of that.
So 17,000 acre feet of groundwater in
across the entire district.
Across, including the 2,500.
Including OIDs.
That's pumping there.
Yep.
And then the city of Oakdale is another 9,000 acre feet, correct?
I think it's closer to 5 or less, 3,700. Yeah.
With the industrial use, it's closer to 9. With ConAgra and the storms, I've seen their reports, but you have it all together, they're in the city, it's right at 9.
Well, they might be pumping on their own property, but that's not having to do with the city.
Yeah, and actually that 38,000, I believe, actually includes Oakdale, or city of Oakdale. That's the Oakdale management area.
Okay.
Yeah. That's just off the top of my head. We looked at
that. That's great. That's 38,000 acre feet of water where there's surface water available. Right? I mean, theoretically, that's 38,000 acre feet every year of groundwater being used. Then in this process, are we looking at water quality? For instance, if you look at West Modesto, you look at Patterson, we've had water quality issues chronic in those communities for a long time. Patterson's got hexavalent chromium. Modesto's had nitrogen, nitrates, uranium, arsenic on the west side of Modesto. We're pumping, for these reports, about 20,000 acre feet of water to service neighborhoods in the Modesto service area. Is that correct? I mean, You can
It's higher than that.
Is it? How high is it, you know, Paul?
I read some recent data that was literally around 40, but don't quote me on that. I'm pretty sure it's higher than 20.
I just look at the graphs and it looked like about 20, but
I would say it's at least 20 because about half the water they use comes from pumping wells. So
Yeah.
that would imply that it's around 30.
so we're using 30,000 acre feet of groundwater in the city of Modesto where there's a water treatment plant and surface water available. And the groundwater is of lower quality than the surface water that we could supply to the neighborhoods, usually on the west side of Modesto.
If price wasn't, money wasn't.
Well, how
A
much money are we talking? Because we're talking about here, if you put all this on the non-district piece, we don't take all these other bites out of the apple to get to groundwater sustainability. You're talking about, we already know Turlock subbasins got challenges they're probably not going to meet. They're going to remove acres on the east side of Turlock. Here in the Modesto subbasin, you know, in the non-district east area, we've got about 30,000 acres out there. If we're lazy, in my opinion, and don't take on these surface water use opportunities, we're going to pull out 25,000 acres of permanent crops on the east side of the county. And we're going to be talking to our sheriff, we're going to be talking to our Health and Human Services folks, we're going to be talking to everybody about their budgets because we're not laying, you know, money, right? Yeah, okay, $10 million, $20 million worth of pipe to get these problems fixed. And so I agree with the gentleman here. We need to take a look at this as on a community level and not just assume that, hey, the east side guys are bad, pitchforks and torches, let's go get them. They shouldn't have planted that to begin with. We've basically replaced urbanized area on the east side that's been urbanized, you know, out of our agricultural lands in the city of Modesto. And we can make this work. I completely agree with the gentleman. We've got the Stanislaus River, we've got the Tuolumne River, we've got the water treatment plants on both rivers. And we simply need to lay some pipe and interconnect some surface water usage. So I hope that this board, this work group, goes back to the broader group and talks about comprehensive, thoughtful, lower economic impact ways to solve, you know, groundwater quality issues, but also our local economic issues. I represented the south part of the district down in Coalinga, San Joaquin, Mendota, Kerman. I've seen what happens to towns when you tear out all the agriculture, the empty schoolrooms, retail sales, housing crunch, the economic engine falls apart. And these towns are mad at the state and they're mad at the feds, and they're right. I agree with them. I represented at the federal level. They're correct. It sucks. We have all the control right here in this working process. And I don't hear anyone talking about doing the things we need to do to use our surface water that we have and complete some infrastructure projects that are small compared to what we're talking about in terms of devastating agriculture. So those are my comments. We're pumping too much water in districts where there's surface water available. We're pushing out orchards in Waterford, we're pushing out orchards in Riverbank, we're pushing out orchards in Oakdale, we're pushing out orchards in Salida, all that are supplied with surface water to put in more houses. God bless it, everyone needs a home. To put in more houses that are supplied with groundwater. This makes us collectively as a community very silly humans. In the history of the world, we're approaching being the silliest humans in the history of the world, in my opinion. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, I think asking the cities to pay more for treated water is a hard sell, especially politically.
Ask them to balance their books. We lose the tax base. We lose our agricultural land.
Yeah.
We lose, if you take 20,000, 25,000 acres of farming out of Stanislaus County, then we're probably going to take 50,000 acres out of farming. When you include the Turlock subbasin, you're talking about $912 million just for the 20,000. We're talking about several $billion-dollar impact with the economic multipliers, the farm gate value, the loss of ag trade, the loss of jobs, the loss of all the things that happen in our community with this activity. And if you want to talk about what it comes down to, $3 a month on a water bill, $4 a month on a water bill, we've done the calcs. I'm getting them from Turlock and Series. It's not that big a deal compared to what we're driving straight into, eyes wide open. So yes, we are going to spend some money. We have state and federal grants we can go after. there are folks that want to help us with this thing. We can all pay a few bucks more not to have the kind of economic devastation that we're heading towards.
Appreciate the comment. I can't speak for the cities, just throwing that out there. The other thing is don't forget there's surface water that's being provided, made available to non-district east lands.
I think you're participating in that.
Yeah, from both OID and MID. And I don't think MID has any participation yet.
MID
So-
won't fill a pipe. Nobody's going to put in a pipe. I mean, it's going to cost Alexander and I probably $500,000 to put the pipe from OID to our farm. And we have a sincere expectation to get it 8 out of 10 years, 7 out of 10 years. We won't have a dry pipe for $500,000. If I'm in MID and they're telling me 7 and 10 years and I've got to go put that pipe in, 7 and 20 years, I'm sorry, 7 and 20 years I might get water based on my cows. And we're staring at them today with a full reservoir and they're not allocating water to the out-of-district growers. Larry's one of 5 directors who actually voted to allocate water to the out-of-district growers. No farmer has $500,000 or $1 million or $3 million for a dry pipe. You know, and so, you know, we've had these discussions. They might be board meeting. Price the water right to match up with its frequency, and give the growers some commitment that we're actually water the program, and you'll get some infrastructure investment. So, thank you.
Thanks for your feedback. Appreciate it.
I'm Robert Frobos. I would comment, Eric, at the luncheon we had the other day, you said the OID program was available 7 out of 10 years.
Generally.
FFA luncheon. And the MID, all the documents at MID show that program is available 50% of the time. So it's really not that far apart.
Good. That's great. Thank you.
But this year's not one of them, according to me, right?
It's according to all the documentation, it's only available during average or above average wet years. And that is documentation that started way before I was ever on board. It goes back to the GSP that was all put together with all the agencies that STRGBA would be available during average or above average wet years. And it would be available 50. Not you can do the same numbers like you come up with your 7 out of 10.
Right.
If history repeats itself, it would be available 5 out of 10. So,
Thank you.
My knowledge, what I know is that the triggering mechanism for the GRP is a full allotment for the farmers in the district. So if they're going to get that triggers the groundwater replenishment bill. Just wanted to clarify that. Number 2, I want to piggyback off of, I forget your first name, and I've heard you speak before at the WAC meetings, right? So he's very involved in the groundwater community and knows quite a bit about it. So what my concern is, more than anything, is that we have our opportunity right now to make us sustainable. We have that opportunity. It's right in our face with surface water to groundwater pumpers, to the city of Oakville, to the city of Riverbank. We should be looking at that. And I'll tell you why. The other reason is, and he touched on it, Mike, briefly. The state of California is not fooling around with this, you guys. This is a game they're not playing. The only reason we got that GSP plan was last time is we, as much as promised them that we would implement the plans that we put in writing. We're not implementing those plans.
I mean, the project.
We're not doing the projects. We're not implementing them. That puts us. I'm saying, and it's scaring me. It's scaring me because I know the state of California. I know the state water board. I've been involved with them in the last 15 years. I know what they're capable of doing. They want to run the show. They want to control our water. You guys ought to know that through the FERC relicensing process. They're trying it there. Unimpaired flows. They want to control the groundwater, the surface water. I beg you, don't let them guys do this to us. We're going to put the future generation farmers, I don't care if you're west side, middle of the town, east side, in jeopardy. All of them are going to be in jeopardy because the state is not going to let us get away with this. We have to implement these projects for the good, we have a moral obligation to the future of your children and grandchildren to do that. Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate that comment. And I only place I disagree with you is that we are implementing the projects. The problem is when OID and MID make the water available, if people don't take it, it doesn't do us any good.
That's a
So-
100% point right there. Where's the moral obligation? The moral obligation, the districts put the programs together, go through all the expenses of doing the sequence and everything out of regular money, and then the people that are complaining
Right.
don't participate in the program
Right.
when it's available, when they promised they would.
Right.
So yeah, it's a very frustrating thing when we say we all have to work together and there's moral obligations. Yes, there is. But when the district steps up and spends, whether it's OID or MID, that spend money to put these programs together out of ratepayers' money, and then the people that are actually went and created the problem by putting all the holes in the ground, then when they don't do their moral obligation by stepping up and paying for the water, then that's where the problem is. It's not the districts not creating the projects as they promised the state they would. I want to make that very clear. Those projects that are in our GSP were put in there, and those projects are all in place by the districts, the agencies, and it's a failure of the basically the landowners that are pumping the water to participate in the program. That's where the problem is. It's not hard to figure out. It's very
Bob, they
frustrating.
can't do it for $200 and you know it.
Well, they're
They
buying it.
can't build $2 million worth of infrastructure and pay $200 an acre foot for that water. They cannot do that.
Hey, Larry,
That doesn't work. It doesn't work for you.
Larry, they wouldn't do it when it was 60 or 80. They promised our board.
60 or 80?
Hang on. When I was on the first year, I was on the board.
Yeah.
They promised.
We're on the same board together. by
We're on
the
the
way.
same board, but we disagree. This is one thing me and Larry disagree with, if you haven't figured it out. They promised the very first year I was on the board, and we voted for a 1-year plan with the condition that we were going to make a long-term plan. And they came to that board meeting and they promised us that if we implemented that program this year at $80 and $60, that they would buy 15 to 18,000 acre feet of water from us that year. You know how much they bought? Zero. So it doesn't matter whether it's $60, $80, or $200. And that is proof right there that that's true.
Well, we talk about above average year, below average year. This is what the doctrine says. There's going to be an above average year on the heels of a drought when the reservoir is empty. The district's playing catch up and it can't allocate water because the reservoir is full. This is why we elect humans to the board. This is why we elect thinking humans to the board and unelect them if they can't make good decisions. And there will be a year such as this one, when we have an average year, not too far above average, an average year came in late, keep making decisions, but the reservoir is full because we've had 3 or 4, 5, 6 good solid years in a row, and the reservoir is not empty. And that's when you allocate some water. That's when the pipe isn't going to stay dry. That sends a signal to the cities, to the farmers that, hey, if you build the infrastructure, the water will come. We're doing exactly the opposite now in some districts. And I hope that this board will give direction at your upcoming workshop, that these are the things we need to do. And as local leaders, which are well represented on that panel. I was there last time. You got a lot of great elected leaders, representing the city councils, the city managers, the county. Tell them, get your act together. Use other words if you want. Get your act together, start making the agreements, start working between the cities and the districts, or we are going to devastate this county economically, and it's going to come down on the backs of the working families who are not going to have public safety, they're not going to have the health services, they're not going to have the local services they need. The school districts in these neighborhoods are going to have empty chairs, and each one of those chairs comes with a $20,000 check. And it's going to cause devastation that a few $1 million here and there, and yes, a few bucks extra on the water bill, which is consistent with every one of these cities' urban water management plans. Every one of these cities states clearly in their urban water management plan that they need to prioritize use of surface water and get off groundwater reliance. So a couple bucks, yes, they've already made the commitment. We need them to live up to their commitments. We need the district to do the right thing consistently, sending the right signals. And we need the county to start using the, what is it here? No, the land control processes to not allow home building on groundwater where there's no plan and no consistent effort for surface water delivery.
Thanks.
Well, this is a first.
I've never agreed with Paul Provost before, but I have to agree with him today. The cost of this $200 an acre water, I've seen it in Oakdale offered. Some pull, but they only pull the minimum under the contract. A few pull more than that. $200 an acre foot. We have cousins. We have fellow farmers down south paying $1,000 an acre foot growing the same almonds that we grow up here in Oakdale. The cost is something that those that purchase and are pumping the underground East Oakdale, they have to just suck it up. I sucked it up when I went and bought expensive Oakdale irrigation district land, paying an extra $10,000 or $15,000 an acre because there was a ditch going through my ranch full of water, and I pulled that ditch water, service water. I have the burden of the interest on that $10,000, $15,000. Heck, I'm paying $800, $700, $800 a year interest alone. Not talking about the principal. And then Oakdale irrigation sends me a bill. Those farmers on the east side have to suck it up and start pumping the water that's being offered to them at whichever price. You can't throw all that burden on the rest of us at high land costs.
I continue to believe that it'd be advantageous for the board to try to look at projects as a whole and not just the MID, OID, irrigator farming projects, but the other projects that should be ongoing. So it brings a little bit more commonality to it and some points that maybe people can stand behind together and work towards getting updates from the city about, current city of Modesto views on expanding the treated water from the treatment plants and what are some of those costs look like so others can, be in the know and appreciate what the city's trying to do, what the city of Oakdale is looking to do, city of Riverbank, right? So we can get it beyond just this farmer to farmer thing, because while we see where the majority of the issues seem to be, to Mr. Duarte's point, it needs to be countywide and across the board. So we should understand what other projects are ongoing, so we can appreciate those.
Yeah, we actually have a list of projects in the GSP. We talked a little bit about it in the annual reports. There are a number of city and basin-wide projects, not just the projects that are taking water from MID and OID to the non-district east. Those are just the highlighted projects right now, and the most significant projects right now with pulse cell expansion going on in OID and that grant. Those are the biggest impact projects, but they're certainly not the only ones. But thank you.
Okay, we got a couple questions.
Yep. You still there, Liz?
Yes, I'm still here.
Great. Perfect. Louis Burketta, I'm an in-district farmer and a non-district east farmer. I had a question about the slide that we're actually on right now. On MW8, you see that big blue triangular piece that's in the middle of non-district east?
Yep.
Great. So those are actually my neighbors, and they're in district. They've been pumping around 8,000 acre feet a year. I think Eric should be more familiar with that. They built a pipeline this year, and they're planning on using their surface water. That's correct, right?
I hear rumors. I don't know for sure.
Okay, well, you guys have said it publicly before. So, point being, that triangular piece that's pumping 8,000 acre feet a year, that's been there since 2014. How do you know if that's affecting east side or if that's affecting the blue area, Oakdale management? How do you tell?
So the answer is it's affecting the whole area. I mean, we only have one data point there, MW8. I don't have the hydrograph for MW8 as part of this presentation, but you can take a look at the annual report that was submitted at the end of March for the last water year. I don't have that at my fingertips right now. Again, not part of this presentation, but any pumping that's happening in the eastern area is going to have an area of influence. So I can't answer that question specifically, but I would encourage you to take a look at that hydrograph from the last annual report to see.
Yeah, I was just curious because your last slide, you know, said that the non-district east area was affecting the Oakdale management area, but I mean, that's basically in the middle of non-district east. That's not exactly a small amount of water.
Yeah.
And I was also wondering, how do you relate Modesto's groundwater pumping? Because they do, Modesto management area does a large amount of groundwater pumping as well. I think on the 15-year, your summary data says it's around 130,000 acre feet, 15-year average. How would that relate to Oakdale management area?
Again, it depends on where within the Modesto management area you are. This is one groundwater basin. There are no groundwater divides. There are no, there are no faults that are impeding flow. So if you have a well in the Modesto management area that's pumping and it's very close to the OID management area, it's going to have an influence that may overlap with the OID management area. So, yeah, so this is.
So essentially, assuming my numbers are correct and the 15-year average for Modesto management area pumps 130,000 acre feet annually, then that would have some effect on the rest of the basin.
Or again, it depends on where the pumping is occurring, right? These management areas are large. As you can see on this map, the Modesto management area spans pretty much the entire extent of the subbasin from west to east. There's that finger along the southern, like the patchwork, as Eric referred to it as earlier. So it really depends on where the pumping is occurring. The numbers that were reported as part of the water budget, part of the annual report analyses, were by management area, but it does not specify, it does not break down management area into sort of sub-regions. It's reporting as the total management area. So it really depends on locations.
Sub-regions, or is that you're just going to look at it?
I'm sorry?
Will you look at it in sub-region, or are you just going to look at it in terms of management area?
Well, that has not been the plan. we've been looking at, first of all, this is a sub-basin wide, the water budget's overdraft, it's a sub-basin wide, DWR is looking at this sub-basin, right? They are concerned with the Modesto sub-basin. The management areas are more for us to help us manage the sub-basin. And so we have not yet divided these management areas into sub areas. No, we have just looked at the management areas as a whole. And so again, DWR is.
Yeah, I understand. Not to cut you off, I just want to be timely. On slide 16 and 17, I can't remember which one. Would you be able to go to those? Or start with 16?
That's 16? Is this what you meant?
Oh, no, it's the one that Eric was looking at, the Western Principal Aquifer, next to the river.
What, the river or the Western Lower?
I think it's Western Lower. Oh, yeah. So the one before or after that, it's closer to the actual river. Yeah, that one. So I heard you say that it's based on seasonal inflections, right? Is that correct? The upward and downward of that graph when it goes.
Yeah, I think a lot of these fluctuations are seasonal. Yes.
Okay, because I'm familiar with a water cell that was occurring in that area over that time period that amounted to the sale of around 10,000 acre feet of water. Essentially, that would be able to affect that area, right? The level of the water in that area.
I'm sorry, I missed the first part of what you said. What's occurring in this area?
So during that time frame you're talking about, that 2020, 2021, 2022 time frame, there was a water bill going on that equated to around 10,000 acre feet of pumping.
Okay.
That would have an effect that could make it look seasonal, correct?
Sure. Sure.
Okay. Are you familiar with that water cell, or have you accounted for it in this data?
I'm not familiar with the water cell. No.
Okay.
And this
Maybe
is this is not accounted for in the data. This is measured data. So this is not a model here. This is actually what was happening in this well. So no, I mean it's not. This is actually what was happening. So it's nothing that I can account for here.
Well, so it is accounted for the data in the sense that it's measured data, so the use.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. I think that's it for now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I see you, Stacy. Just give me a second. Paul's got one more comment here. I'll come right to you next.
Liz, I just wanted to make a comment, and correct me if I'm wrong here, relative to the discussion around MWA. So geologically and historically, maybe it's better description, the gradient hydrogeologically wise was from west to east and generally continues to be.
From east to west.
Excuse me, east to west.
Right, just like the river flows.
Yes.
Mhm.
And with that in mind, the greatest area of depression is generally in that area. So what has occurred is the gradient has lessened.
That's exactly.
Places
Yeah.
is definitely lessened to the west. So it is gravitating to what I would call not a cone of depression in that area, but a general depression in that area. So it is generally, not that the flow is still not going generally to the west, but it's generally gravitating toward that depression, which would be in that area. If that made sense, what I just said.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, so the contour maps are not part of this presentation. We have not developed them yet for the fall 2024 event. But anybody can check out the last annual report. We have contour maps for both the fall and spring events. And if you look at the hydrograph, I mean, the Paul Cell well, again, I'm going to go back to the Paul Cell well. This is the best record. The two Paul Cell wells are the best records of historical groundwater elevations that we have in the east. The other wells that are surrounding it are newer monitoring wells. So we don't have the historical perspective like we do for the data for these two wells. If you go back, so like you said, groundwater flows in the subbasin naturally from the east to the west, and there's a natural gradient. And if you look at the contour maps in the eastern part of the subbasin, because of this groundwater level decline that's happened over time, the gradients are relatively flat. They should be steeper. And if the pumping wasn't, if there was no pumping in the subbasin, there would be sort of a steady, relatively steady gradient, right, from east to west. Not, I shouldn't say steady, but there would be a continuous gradient. But in the east, if you look at the contour maps, there's an area that's relatively flat, and that's from the pumping. And so it's not a cone of depression, but it is a regional depression. And we're seeing that, if we look at this Paul Cell hydrograph, if you go back to 2005, I mean, you can see when the pumping started in this area. The pumping started around 2008. That's when the water level started to decline. The first few years this well was monitored, it was flat. But when pumping started in this area, water level started to decline and has continued to decline. And if you look at the contour maps and pretend for a second that pumping never started, and assuming that groundwater elevations naturally were about the same as they were in 2005, you would see an elevation of about 145 in the east in this area. And if you extrapolated the gradients across the subbasin, you would see much steeper gradients than you see on the contour maps today. So yeah, I think that's a really good point, Paul, and I appreciate you pointing that out. But again, we don't have contour maps. Yeah.
Hold on. I got another person for you. I'll come back to you. I'll come back to you guys in just a second. Okay. Stacy's on the phone, and then I'll be working my way around here. Go ahead, Stacy.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks so much. So I had to log off for just a moment, so I may have missed something, but I wanted to just comment on some of the things that I heard being said. I totally agree with John Duarte that action needs to be taken and that the surface water does need to be utilized for our entire subbasin to the extent that that is possible. And there is nothing that is stopping any grower from participating in the groundwater replenishment program at MID or OID's program to the extent that water is made available. There's no reason that the growers should not be participating in that. So there is something that's available. And I hope that the growers will participate in that when those programs are available. Aside from that, there's a lot of discussion about, this very scary, the state's going to come in and take control. The state is not going to come in and take control if we are doing what we are supposed to be doing, which is implementing management actions if the projects are not successful. And so I think it's important for us to continue to recognize that STRGBA provided an opportunity for the subbasins to create management areas. And that is what we have done. And we have done that based on the science and the reports and the investigation that has been done by our experts and consultants to confirm that there are varying conditions within our subbasin. There is not a one-size-fits-all that's required by STRGBA, nor is it appropriate based on everything that our experts have shown us, including what was reported today in the report. So we fully support the district, the GSA, implementing management actions and ensuring that where there is a problem, that problem is being addressed. The problem is not subbasin wide. Yes, STRGBA regulates and the state regulates the entire subbasin, but the state provided for management areas for a reason, and that's because the state does not mandate one size fits all, nor is that appropriate here. And then finally, I just wanted to speak to the representation that there was a water sale going on and 10,000 acre feet. And to the extent that you're talking about the water sale that occurred to Del Porto Water District, that water sale was reported and approved by the state and the federal government, and the reports that have been made by the consultants that were involved in overseeing that sale have been submitted to the GSA so that our experts can use them. And in fact, those reports have been cited in the submittals that have been sent to the state. So I'm not sure where the disconnect is there, but I do want to make sure that everyone understands that that sale was approved by the state and all of the reports have been submitted to the state and federal agencies and to this GSA. Thank you.
Thanks, Stacy.
Yeah, Liz, Mike Day again. I looked at the last groundwater elevation contour map, and I think we need to pay more attention to water surface elevations, our surface water bodies, the rivers, Vesto Reservoir when we're doing that, and draw them up, because that surface water body has a connection with the groundwater right underneath it. And so whatever the elevation of that river is, or that reservoir is, that's the pressure right underneath it. And the Vesto Reservoir leaks, looked into a USGS report, something like 35,000 acre feet a year. I'm pulling something out of my brain, which is a bad thing, but maybe it was 20. Anyway, the idea is a really big number, and it's contributing. And then, of course, we know interconnected surface water is one of our criteria. A lot of water that's flowing also beyond just kind of below the ground, right out of the rivers into that area. So I think we need to pay a little more attention when we draw those contours to what's going on in the surface water.
Okay, yeah,
Okay.
thank you. Thank you for that comment.
Louis Burkett. Thank you guys, so commissioners. I just wanted to point out, Eric, when you were talking about groundwater pumping, I think in 2014, I pumped 18,000 acre feet during the year, and then they sold water in the end of September, all basin. So I think that's what Mr. Gordy was talking about. And as far as the wells, I mean, I don't want anybody to get a false narrative because there's problems throughout the basin. But that well in the first slide on your program, that shouldn't even be counted. There's 3 test wells around there, 2 of them on my neighbors, 1 on mine, and they were all no good. So if you drill a test well in a known bad area, what are your results? You know? Yeah. So I think that's at 292 feet. And I spotted like 50 other parcels, large parcels up and down Clarabelle Road on the east side. And the average elevation that I came up with was like 210 feet, 209. And if you use 225 or 220, that's like 72 foot elevation. So I don't think it's representative. I'd like to see monitor the wells on the OID South Main. There's 2 there. And, you know, those were being run steadily while OID was selling water out of basin. They had a big contributing effect. And I love OID. I depend on them. Got great opportunities, plenty of surface water. We could do a lot more. Same with MID. Now, everybody wants to pit everybody against each other. And I love my brother a bunch, but pitting people against each other in different communities, east side, west side, it's not going to fix the problem. So what I think you guys need to focus on is like when EWR found that the GSP was insufficient, they said 17 times in there that you need what do you call it? Feasible projects. And $200 an acre foot plus project cost is not feasible. And you know, I've heard some of these directors say to farmers, that's not the right way to talk. You know, people on our boards, you know, we got to work together, and without having these projects be successful, whether it's MID or OID, the whole basin's going to fail. If you just focus on management actions, it's going to fail. So I think we need to refocus our direction on how to get projects done, whether it's working with districts in unison, and you can get more funding that way. Yeah, you know, come up and promote the project, get grants. Districts, municipalities, whether it's cities or districts, can manage these projects. And I think that's the only way it's going to fix it. And we're going to have a sustainable groundwater basin for future generations. So that's my take on it. And the biggest thing I see, I mean, it's not the lack of tools. It's the lack of willingness to work together. And people are, for whatever reason, throwing arrows at each other. And I've got to stop that, figure out the problem, figure out how to take care of the task. Thank you.
Thanks. Just a comment. Yeah, give me just a second. So I'm fortunate to be able to pull up the history of OID pumping and water sales here. So in 2014, you're correct, OID pumped a little over 18,000 acre feet. That was a water short year, so that's a drought mitigation measure we use. There was no water sale in 2014. In 2015, it was started off a very dry year, consecutive dry year. So we started the year pumping, and we turned off our pumps at about the end of April. And in that year, we ended up doing some water sale that year because we ended up having surplus. And with OID, it's easier to lose it. If we don't sell it, we get no benefit. The government gets it for free. So it wasn't like we would have carryover the next year.
That's all your water sales, right? You know, you raise the bar so high that it's almost unaccessible to farmers. So that's purposeful for your water sales. It's easier to dump down the river. So, you know, you can try to dodge questions, but OID's precipitated this problem. And as much as I love OID and want to work with them and everything, they got to focus on projects and working with people and helping our basin like they've voted on those resolutions to take care of the water basin. Both districts have. Now they gotta come through and do it. And I'm not, hey, nothing personal with you, but
Oh, yeah.
that's just how I see it.
Yeah, I'm just giving you the facts off the spreadsheet. That's all I'm doing. Thank you. Anybody else in the room?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
OID had 10,000 acre feet of their surface water rights were allocated to the city of Oakdale, right?
Mhm.
Okay,
Allocated.
and I worked on a project one time trying to be able to utilize that. Way that, got straws out of the ground. And you mentioned that if it's 5,000 acre feet to the city of Oakdale, okay, so when Herman Darnball was the director of OID, when last time that he ran, which would have been the last time he didn't have to run, so nobody ran again, so it would have been 6 years ago, he made a promise to all the voters in the district that he was going to work on getting a pipe from the South San Joaquin's water treatment.
want to make sure we're talking about this presentation and the basin and everything.
Right, John Duarte's talking about, the cities need to get, they need to do their part, and when they're 100% pumping water.
Yep.
They need to be doing their part, and that's a valid point. You can't just look to the farmers and say it's all their problem when you got, cities are, expanding, continuing to use more groundwater. Without, anyway, I'm getting to the point of,
thank you.
So you got the 10,000 acre feet of surface water. Herman said that he was going to work with South San Joaquin Water Treatment Plant and run a pipe from there into the city of Oakdale, so that they could get the city of Oakdale on surface water. Now that was a good project. Now, has any progress been made? Has the city worked with OID, South San Joaquin? Has OID worked? Has Herman followed through with that promise to try to do? That would be an extremely good project because the surface water rights are there. The water treatment plant's not too far away. And you get them off of surface, off of groundwater. You could get them almost completely off of groundwater.
Thanks. Sounds expensive. Anybody else?
I think Alex wants.
Yeah.
So this team is making a decision on water, basically, but they're also responsible for the long-term effects that decision on water is going to have on our community. And you're going to have a lot of tools in your toolbox as we deal with the state. And one of them I know is fallowing ground. We look at the east side non-district growers. That economy is about 1.15 billion a year using a conservative economic multiplier. So 0.25% of that goes to the county in taxes, let alone property taxes, which I haven't included. And that money goes to all your county services. And those county services are going to affect everybody's city way more than they're going to affect the land that's out there on the east side. That's the sheriff, that's the veterans, that's the child protective services, that's a lot. So yeah, it might cost more money, but we're going to lose a lot of income into our community if we take out that industry, or 70% of that industry. And once you found you can't turn back on the water in 3 or 4 years and recreate that economy. There are serious consequences to having that tool in your tool belt. Also, if water runs downhill, do we know that we're going to save the groundwater level by turning off the economy on the east side? If we are still pumping groundwater. And so my question is, what is the study and what are the numbers if we were to use surface water where we can use surface water and divide it up? So the easy ones would be the new developments. Look at Riverbank and Salida. What happens if they go into surface water? What about the poor areas of Modesto City where the water quality is all bad? What if we extend that and put it onto surface water? What if it goes onto surface water? And then you can look at Oakdale and you can look at the other parts of Modesto. So we're only using 50% of our surface water capacity. What is the number? What is the impact if we were to put all of those places under surface water? How does that affect our groundwater level? Has Todd Groundwater done a study on that?
Liz might be able to speak to this, but I know the combined, off the top of my head, the combined use of Riverbank, Waterford, and Oakdale is like 10,000 acre feet. And in the non-district east, I think there's 30,000 acres or something like that. You're talking about 3 acre feet per acre, at least 90,000 acre feet. So the order of magnitude there is substantially different. The other thing is water flows downhill, like you said, those cities, Oakdale and Riverbank, you saw the water levels. They're a lot more consistent and not dropping at the rate the east is. The other thing is that if you look at the Paul Sell well, so in 2012, right here actually, so right there is 2012. There was some development in the non-district east before that point, but that's when the bulk of that ground came online. And so this is the effect of the non-district east right there.
And there is a right to farm ordinance under Stanislaus County, so if land is taken out of agriculture for urbanization, there is a right to farm ordinance. But you're not, do you have the numbers that show that destroying an economy is one of your tools is actually going to save you?
I'm not trying to answer that question, but
No, I mean,
I appreciate the comment.
Yeah, comment generally related to that, but earlier comment about to do with that stuff. And I was thinking back to that. So, but I'll preface it with this. So there's pressure from the state to reduce water use within communities. I think they want to get down to 42 gallons per capita. So if you look at the city's history, it's gone from a peak of, I believe, again, don't quote me, about 33,000 acre feet of surface use down to last year 23 or something like that. So there has been a peak if you assume that 50-50, groundwater somewhere it's lower now because it's proportional to 50. On average, that comes out of just about 28. So if you replace that with surface water, that would just be more water available technically. But when you look at the overall water balance, it does take from there too. So you somehow have to make that up. So when you start putting all these pieces together, obviously, if you don't find a way to fill, make up for those pieces that are being used in another way, you're still going to be short. Now, if you're reducing, as this state is saying, that does make more available for that increment. So if it's 50-50 there, and there's a permanent reduction from 33 to 23, double that because of groundwater, you gain 20,000 right there. That makes sense.
Sure. Well, there's just years.
I'll give you 1 minute, so you're already past the 5. But
all right,
1 minute.
Normal to wet years, we have abundant surface water in this community, in these watersheds, and we can be supplying. I don't know why not 100% of Modesto cities and all these other cities water needs through surface water and avoiding using our groundwater. There's no necessity to use groundwater to 50% ratio, or in some cases 100% ratio, when we've got abundant surface water, and we do very often.
I think there may be some need for mixing due to organics, but that really speak to it.
And I'm not saying that agriculture should be surface water. It's just that we have to do everything.
Just a couple of quick comments on City of Modesto. So on the west side, generally the groundwater is already high, but we get mentioned that in certain parts it's still high to the point where it's actually harming crops. This, as was mentioned earlier, the elevations aren't on the slide this time around, but they've been in past presentations and in past reports. On the east side of the city of Modesto, there's actually groundwater. So even though right now we're not technically reducing groundwater use further, nor we're not accepting more surface water, we do have a mound that's, at least in a localized location on the east side of the city, that's actually sending water, say, back east, because there's still a lot of percolation generally happening within the Modesto management area. So there are a lot of things to consider. Your product groundwater quality. The other side of that is also making sure that we keep the groundwater low, in the sense that, especially within the city, the way we manage stormwater, we have to maintain 10-foot clearance from the groundwater or stormwater recharge, not only for the benefit of moving. So if we start raising the groundwater elevations, artificially by surface water, there is a chance that we can special contamination. Just some separate conversation. And technically, as part of this implementation of GSP, at least our actions shouldn't make it. Not have to make it better, but we can't make it worse. So there's that consideration. So it's a complicated situation with that, and the conjunction piece really do well, but generally for the most part, the west side, it actually was shown in some of the hydrographs. We're already above the measurable objective, which is way past the minimum threshold. So at a certain point, we do start seeing some diminishing returns by allowing the groundwater levels to climb too high. It doesn't only impact groundwater quality, but also does impact water.
But then they knew that Permian they're buying the land, right? That
Sure.
wasn't probable, and that's why they make money.
So we're not responsible for the west side reclamation. They've got to pump the groundwater level down to the west side. You've got to pump the groundwater level down the west side. That's river bottom ground out there with 3 rivers coming in there.
But if the water has to be pumped down, it can't take more surface water. There's only so much water there. Actually, be wasted one way. So there's still a lot of work to be done. I'm not necessarily saying that the considerations we're bringing to the board to consider aren't valid ones, but it's a little bit more.
But that's not true for Riverbank, Oakdale, Salida,
I
or water.
I couldn't necessarily.
I'm gonna move on. Mr. Burkett?
Oh,
Yeah.
I just
Yeah.
got one thing.
I'm gonna give you 2 minutes too.
That's
Sorry,
fine.
Yep.
I don't even have that, but,
Okay.
either for these projects, whether they're in district, out of district, in city, water treatment plant, hey, money is the answer, right? And one of the answers is, I'm an in-district farmer too, Eric, you know that? And I've always promoted it. I mean, whether it's MID or OID, district water rates are too cheap, right? Mine's less than $4 an acre foot, okay? In district, cost like 88 or 90 to deliver it. You get subsidized with power revenue from dry dam. Sure, that's good, but if it's $50 an acre foot, you know, OID might be interested in putting together a water treatment plant and taking care of Oakdale and Riverbank and all these East Oakdale high-end residential improvement districts too. So I mean, that's something to throw out there in the mix, layman. I mean, Liz too. I mean, there's a lot of tools out there. We just got to put it in gear.
Appreciate it. Anybody else?
Other than that management action piece, you know,
Okay.
just one of them.
Thank you.
Yeah. So that's why I want to know the city of Oakdale is committed to conserving water, and we're into this. We're not pointing fingers at anybody. You know, it's money. We are solvent. We're doing okay, but we don't have the money to just put a treatment facility in ourselves. So I mean, it's going to take a lot of planning. But I think pointing fingers is not the answer. No one's at fault. We have a big problem, and the only way to fix it is to stand together and put our resources together and figure it out. So that's just my 2 cents. City of Oakdale's working with OID. We have 2 large projects that they actually helped us do. That water is most of our large sports park that we just put in. That's watered by surface water. Unless our pumps break, then we switch to city water for the time we have to. But we take it real serious. Chief water operator sitting right there. He runs out. Make sure that if that pump goes out, it gets if we fix it before we worry about sprinklers and other stuff, it's a priority for us. So we take every drop serious. So just remember, I think no one's not taking it serious. Everyone cares about it. We're looking also to start another project at T.L. Davis, trying to get that on surface water. And just because we have an idea, run a pipe, okay. I got a pipe full of water. I got to get that into my customer's house. You know, so that's very expensive to do. There's a lot to it. It's not just say, run a pipe and now the problem's fixed.
Yeah. When you're irrigating the dog park too with surface water from OID, and then there was some talk about the annexation that's going on, the Sierra Point annexation and incorporating surface water there. So there's some things that are going on for sure.
Yeah, we're trying to do that.
Working together.
That has to have water that because we have the ability.
Right. Yeah, no, that's a good point.
One thing I'll add is the water has been working with the city of Mexico and might be working towards an agreement to supply treated surface water to over half of Waterford and diminish our take. And we're also with that agreement, I'm trying to look in that we can increase that amount from 1,000 acre feet to 2,000 acre feet as new development comes on. So we can do not impact and actually make better the groundwater surface level under the water. So we are making an effort. We're trying to work together and we're in negotiations. So hopefully the next few months we'll have something to say publicly, but until we get there, we have to just continue to negotiate.
That project's in the GSP, correct?
It is the GSP. I wonder how it got there. No, I think it's very, very important that I think I mentioned this to Duarte's when they came and saw me, that we are intertwined with agriculture in this community. So we can say that we have all kinds of other industrial and everything else, but if you look at the industrial businesses in our community, most of this is ag related. So we need to do what we can to work together as a group, as irrigation districts, as all the city, work together to come to a solution that's minimal impact on ag, because ag is the engine for this county, and without ag, this county dries up. So we're going to continue to work together to find that solution. I'm not a big proponent of fallowing land unless that's the absolute last alternative.
Appreciate that. Thanks, Mike. I've got a hand up. Yep, we got one hand up. The phone will come back to you. Nav, NAV, Nav on the phone. Looks like you're unmuted, but we can't hear you. Still can't hear you. Yeah, you might be able to send a chat there so you can take your comment over the chat, possibly.
Maybe it's
Yep, Richard.
Just to my in the city of Waterford. I've been an advocate for about 9 years now, working with Stanislaus County and trying to get surface water to the city of Waterford. And I know that they're working hard. I know that the city of Modesto wants to do something, but they have to make it affordable for a disadvantaged community. That's what's going on there. And that is an ag community. Over 80% of the city of Waterford is disadvantaged. And right now they're in a little bit of trouble because their water is not looking so good, their groundwater. And that's a big concern for me and everybody over there. I don't live in the city of Waterford, but that is my mailing address. So I represent them as a district board member. I represent the city of Waterford for MID. So I've always been an advocate to get surface water to them. I hope we can get that done in this year, possibly, because they are in a little bit of trouble and they're expanding right now too. And if I'm not mistaken, you only have 4 pumps, I believe, deep wells.
4 or 5 in Waterford and 2 in.
And right, I forget about it. I forget about that, but they're part of that. They're part of it too. So it'd be nice, and it is in the GSP, which you mentioned earlier. There's a project that we can do, and I think that I don't know if my board will agree with it. I don't know. I know they don't agree with the east side at this point, but they might agree with helping out the city of Waterford. Just wanted to throw that in there.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right. Great conversation. Appreciate it. So, I think we can actually hear Nav here. He's still had a comment.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay, thank you so much. Sorry about that. I'm a in-district MID grower on the east side, and I heard some comments that I thought were important around, land values and the cost of buying in district versus out of district, as well as comments surrounding, the GRP program and how everyone should be using it. My comment is, as an in-district landowner, I understand that we need to think of this as on a basin-wide basis, not a east, west, in-district, out-of-district basis. We want the success of our farming community. We want our employees and our vendors and ourselves to be successful. And I think that the only way that happens is if we think outside the box and don't have a in versus out or west versus east mentality. And I think the key to that is, for example, I have neighbors across the canal from me that are out of district. If they get impacted because they they have to fallow land or they have to pay too much for surface water, they are in risk of going out of business or maybe fallowing half their ground. That impacts me too, because oftentimes we share equipment, we share employees, we share vendors, we get economies of scale because of our proximity. So I think it's very important when we think about access to surface water and making that surface water available to out of district folks, that we think about the cost, not only in good times when almond prices or corn, whatever commodity we're thinking about, walnut prices are good, but also when they're bad. And $200 an acre foot may seem okay, you know, in the current environment of almond prices, but if a year ago or 2 years ago, if you're forcing that out of district grower to then buy all of their water via surface water and it's 3 acre foot to grow a crop, that's $600, and that's just not financially feasible. And if you look at what Turlock's done, their cost for GRP water is $50 an acre foot. I mean, I think the key to this, in addition to, you know, having some sort of demand reduction, is we need to make that surface water in years of average or above average more cost effective. Otherwise, the incentive, and I've talked to neighbors about this who are out of district, to use it and put in hundreds of thousands or maybe millions of dollars of infrastructure to take advantage of it, it's just cost prohibitive. And those growers are going to choose instead to fallow ground or not replant ground than buy that water, especially if it's at $200 an acre foot or higher, and there's a requirement that they take all that water with no ability to use the groundwater. Most of these growers want to take the surface water because it's of a better quality. The groundwater oftentimes has salt or bicarbs or chlorides, and it's not the most ideal way to water their trees, but there has to be a more thoughtful approach around the cost and the cost not only of the water but the infrastructure. And I just don't see why 50 times the in-district rate is what we want to charge growers that want to buy into that GRP when our district to the south is charging, you know, $50 an acre foot. Thank you for your consideration of my comment.
Thank you. I don't know if you started by doing this at the beginning, you're not required to, but I wanted to get your name for the record, if you don't mind.
Sure. My name is Nav Athwal.
Thank you. Thank you for the comment. Okay. One more time. Anybody else? All right. Very good discussion. Thank you. Okay, item number 5 is the next meeting. So our next regularly scheduled meeting is June 11th, as noted on the agenda, 1:30. That meeting is anticipated to be here at Oakdale Irrigation District, and there's an option by Zoom as well. But beyond that, next week we've got a groundwater workshop, our next groundwater workshop. So that is at 1:30 at MID on Wednesday. So Modesto Irrigation District, Wednesday at 1:30. The focus of that workshop is going to be well mitigation plan. So we're not going to talk about management actions. It's going to be the well mitigation plan. We will have another workshop following that, hopefully early July time period we're anticipating right now, to then focus on management actions again for that workshop. So the last workshop was about 3 hours. We're trying to keep it around 2 so we don't lose interest and lose people in attendance. So we're looking forward to that workshop. Hopefully you all can make it. Tell your friends.
It's on 11th Street. It's right, it's on 11th Street.
From your office.
No,
MID, yeah, MID border.
I'll give you the address here.
You know when we might have an invite ready?
Yeah, we should have an agenda going out by the end of the week. Yeah, thanks, Christy.
Can I comment on the workshop? I went to one several months ago. I don't know if it's the first one or not. It was the MID offer. We went through the PowerPoint and talked about well mitigation quite exhaustively. We got to the last 8 slides and there was no longer time for public comment when it came to the management actions of the project. And now we're going to have another workshop on well mitigation, which is a small part of this, in my opinion. So I just want to express some objection to making this next workshop with all these critical projects on hand here that we need to understand each other better on, about well mitigation, which is questionable whether it's even even a groundwater basin issue, or if it's just a bunch of crappy old wells that weren't drilled deep enough that are really in district and oftentimes next to towns that are on groundwater, not really affected by the non-district east area. So I hope that we can talk about the broader issues at hand, because it's very important issues at hand, and the well mitigation is a small part of this that we've already exhausted at a previous meeting there that might be.
Thanks. There's a lot to the well mitigation plan. You probably find out if you go. There's a lot to it actually, and it's 50% of our commitment essentially. The way I look at it to DWR. So in our plan, in our GSP that was just approved, they made us make a commitment to developing that well mitigation plan. So we've got a deadline. Yeah, and there's a deadline in January.
Right, there's a simple program, but it's how many wells are legitimately going bad because of the groundwater overdraft in this basin.
And we'll look at that.
And what's
That's part
it
of the
cost to replace them or help those owners out. It's not a long discussion. These other projects and these, getting this groundwater basin sustainable is the big discussion we're having. The well mitigation is a fairly confined discussion. How many are legitimately getting drained out of because of our groundwater overdraft? And what are we going to do about it? Bring a proposal, but then let's get on to the big issues.
Yeah, that's part of the GSP. The workshops are, just to make sure you understand, workshops, there's focus of management actions and well mitigation plan.
We're gonna mix it all up.
Just like the groundwater, right?
Right.
All right. Anybody else? Comments, questions on the workshop or the next meeting?
Mr. Moody, can you put on the agenda to raise the rates of $50?
All right.
Eric will give you a second.
Yeah. All right. Last but not least, did you say what the MID address was?
1231 11th Street will be the second floor.
Thank you.
Unless they change that. That's the only room that'll put it.
Yeah, that's your boardroom, isn't it?
No.
I thought it was the boardroom.
No, it's a larger room.
Oh, it's big. Oh, it's a different one than it was last time. Oh,
So they
okay.
have an retirement place.
Oh,
The workshop will be held in the MID boardroom.
Well, will it? Oh, okay, I thought it was gonna be. I stand corrected. So it'll be in the first.
who overruled who? Jennifer? Jennifer reserved the room, so I'm going to go with Jennifer.
It shows you what happens when you assume. Is that by stand
No, it's down the street.
All right.
They'll have security right at the
It's right. It's right.
Yeah.
across from the
It actually,
building.
yeah. Typically, there's a door on the outside to go in too. Yeah.
It's,
Yeah.
it's directly north of the double
Right.
tree. That's one of the.
Thank you.
And as you come in the front door, it'll be right here.
Okay. Moving on. Item number 6, committee comments reports. Any committee comments or reports from any of them board?
No, I just like to comment that I'm very glad how you showed up today.
Yeah.
Brought a lot of good information, a lot of great ideas. And really what I got out of it was that the cities, counties, the districts, we need to suck it up, work together and get this thing accomplished. And one of the things I truly believe in is negotiations means no one's happy. That's when you have a good negotiated item. So we're gonna have to figure out how to make this happen, despite the fact none of us are gonna be happy about it.
To make everybody happy.
Anybody else?
For Liz, I'd like to re-invite her out to see some of the projects, and I'd like to have Eric Long and whoever else wants to come and see some of the projects, the surface water project that will alleviate some of this well mitigation too.
Thank you.
So it's out there whenever you guys want to come out, take a look at it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Alrighty. So we will now adjourn open session. We're gonna take a short break, 5-minute break here, and then we've actually got closed session today here. So there's one item for closed session. Conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation pursuant to government code, section 54956.9 D2. We got one case. Thank you, everybody.
I think I'm gonna just maybe lose contact. I'm gonna have him go at my place for the interviews and I'll be here.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to have a better.
And you can hit right at Brad.
Brad, yeah, you gotta get on. What do you mean, have him? Oh, he can stay?
He can stay here for closed session if he wants. Yeah, agents and members can stay here.
Appreciate it.